So there's a new piece of this story making the rounds, and if the claims hold up, it's messier than most of the gossip blogs even guessed. A woman named Jacqueline, the editor who reportedly worked on It Ends With Us, sat down for an interview and laid out a version of events that, if true, flips a lot of what the public thought it knew. Now, to be clear up front, this is her account. It hasn't been proven in court, and the other side has told a very different story. But her version is detailed, it's specific, and it's worth walking through carefully. Jacqueline isn't some random internet commentator looking for a moment of attention. By most accounts, she's a working professional with real credits, including editing work reportedly connected to Taylor Swift's projects. According to her, she was brought onto It Ends With Us, in part because she is a domestic violence survivor herself, and Justin Baldoni allegedly wanted someone with that lived experience shaping the film's most sensitive scenes. If her account is accurate, that's the detail that makes everything downstream so uncomfortable. Baldoni, according to Jacqueline, didn't bring her on for a generic assembly cut. He allegedly wanted an authentic perspective, someone who understood what abuse actually feels like from the inside.
Justin said from the beginning, he loves my style of editing. He thinks that I would be great for these kind of montagey scenes. And he knew that I was a survivor because we've talked about it in the past. And he thought that I could bring, a female gaze to the situation.
That's something Ryan's always making fun of. Oh, Justin's female gaze. But
for the parts of the film depicting violence. And the twist, according to her telling, is that the very sequence she poured her own history into is reportedly the one that ended up gutted, allegedly at Ryan Reynolds' request. Before we get further into it, if you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next update on this, because this story is still moving. Okay, let's get into what she actually said. For a long stretch of this saga, the public narrative was straightforward. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds were cast as the ones protecting survivors and protecting the integrity of a film about domestic abuse, allegedly standing against a director accused of being inappropriate on set. That was the version that dominated headlines for months. Jacqueline's account, if accurate, complicates that framing significantly. According to her, it was Ryan Reynolds, not Baldoni, who allegedly pushed to remove the most unflinching depiction of abuse from the finished film. She says she worked on the climactic fight scene, the emotional peak of the whole movie, and that she drew from her own past relationships and experiences to build something longer, raw, and structured around the kind of psychological fragmentation many survivors describe experiencing during and after abuse. By her account, she screened that cut for a room of fellow editors, and it reportedly got a standing ovation. Not just polite nods, an actual room-wide reaction from industry professionals who work in edit bays for a living and don't typically applaud a rough cut out of politeness. If that detail is accurate, it suggests the work itself was, at minimum, technically and emotionally powerful, regardless of what happened to it afterward. And then, according to Jacqueline, it disappeared. When she reportedly sat in a theater to watch the final theatrical version, she says she didn't recognize the scene. It had allegedly been shortened, softened, and stripped of the flashback structure that, in her account, made it feel true to the survivor experience it was meant to represent. Instead, she says, what remained felt more polished, more ambiguous, a version that fit a different tone than the one she says she originally built. This is where the story shifts from disappointing to something closer to a full-blown dispute. For months, the assumption was that Blake Lively, as a producer and lead, was simply fighting for creative control of her own character and her own vision. But leaked or surfaced text messages, which have circulated as part of the broader legal fight between Baldoni and Lively's camps, reportedly show a Sony representative referencing edit notes as coming from Blake Ryan, with Reynolds' name allegedly attached in parentheses. If that reporting is accurate, it would suggest that specific surgical edit requests, including the alleged removal of flashback sequences, were coming not just from Lively, but from Reynolds directly.
The final fight, the big one, I really put my heart and soul into that. And it drew me back to when. And what I remember was having flashbacks, flash forwards, pieces of my life, past relationships. It was all there. So that's how I cut it.
That's a notable detail because Reynolds has spent years building a public image as an outspoken supporter of survivors and a self-aware, feminist-leaning public figure. Jacqueline's account, if true, would mean that image sits uneasily next to allegations that he personally overruled a survivor editor's depiction of the exact trauma she'd lived through. According to Jacqueline, Reynolds allegedly told her, in substance, that her cut wasn't realistic. That's her characterization of what happened, not a confirmed quote with documentation attached, and Reynolds' team has not, to my knowledge, publicly responded point by point to this specific claim. But if her account is accurate, it means a person with no directorial or editing credit on the film was reportedly making a determination about how accurately a survivor's own experience had been portrayed on screen. It's worth sitting with that for a second, purely as a hypothetical, because it's the emotional core of why this story resonates with people. If a woman took her own history, the kind of memory people usually try to bury, not relive, and used it to build something meant to make an audience actually feel what abuse is like, and then someone who never lived that experience allegedly decided her depiction wasn't accurate enough, that's a strange kind of reversal. It would mean the person closest to the actual pain wasn't trusted to depict it, and the person furthest from it got the final say. Again, this is one editor's account of events, not a settled legal finding, and it's contested by the other side. The gap between how this couple has reportedly been perceived publicly and what Jacqueline alleges happened privately is part of what makes this story land the way it does. None of that gap is proof of wrongdoing on its own. Public image and private behavior can genuinely differ from any narrative for a lot of mundane reasons. But it's the tension driving the online conversation right now, across Reddit threads, TikTok stitches, and Instagram comment sections that have been dissecting this frame by frame. Jacqueline's connection to Baldoni reportedly goes back roughly a decade.
I can speak on behalf of Justin because I've known him for so long and I've worked on many projects with him. 100% no, he's a good guy. I've met his family. His wife is awesome.
She says she's edited projects out of his home, knows his family, and describes him, in her own words, as someone whose public persona matches his private behavior. She shared a story about going through a personal tragedy years ago, and Baldoni allegedly texting her something simple: "You're not alone." Take that as one person's personal account of a friendship, not as independently verified fact, but it's clearly part of why she says she was willing to defend him publicly. She's also said that going into their first project together, she was skeptical, that in an industry full of performative kindness, she assumed there might be an angle. Her account is that over years of working together, she didn't see the ego-driven behavior she associates with difficult sets, and that decisions were reportedly made collaboratively rather than dictatorially. Take that for what it's worth. It's testimony from someone with a long working relationship, not a neutral third party, and it's one data point in a much larger, disputed picture. But it's also worth noting that freelance editors generally don't have much incentive to stick around difficult, toxic collaborators for a decade when they have other options, which is part of why some corners of the internet have treated her account as meaningfully different from a paid statement or a press tour talking point. One of the more human details in Jacqueline's account is how reluctant she reportedly was to become part of this story publicly. By her telling, she wasn't looking for visibility. She describes herself as someone who was content working behind the scenes. She says a single comment she left defending Baldoni under an unrelated video unexpectedly went viral, and within a short window, outlets were reportedly reaching out to her directly. Her described reaction wasn't excitement, it was panic. She says she immediately reached out to Baldoni to apologize, worried her comment might complicate an active legal situation. If that account is accurate, It suggests she understood, in that moment, just how high stakes and lopsided the public narrative battle had already become. According to her, it took roughly a year of watching one side's version of events dominate headlines before she was willing to sit down on camera. She's also said she filmed the interview twice, the first attempt reportedly unusable because she was too nervous to get through it. That detail, if accurate, doesn't read like a media-trained, strategically timed statement. It reads more like someone genuinely uncomfortable stepping into public view, which is worth noting given how this kind of testimony is sometimes dismissed as opportunistic. Whatever the underlying truth of the broader dispute, her stated fear wasn't about being factually wrong. By her account, she was confident in what she witnessed. Her stated fear was about consequences, legal exposure, industry blacklisting, and the reality that speaking up meant positioning herself against two extremely powerful, well-represented public figures in a town where reputations and access matter enormously. According to Jacqueline, Baldoni reportedly never badmouthed Lively directly during the editing process. Her account is that he described the film as something deeply important to Lively, a potential comeback vehicle, and that he framed her involvement in creative decisions as reasonable given that stake, rather than venting or name-calling. That stands in contrast to other text messages that have surfaced in the broader legal filings, where members of Lively and Reynolds' side have reportedly used dismissive language about Baldoni. Again, these are competing characterizations from opposing camps in an active dispute, not adjudicated facts, and both sides have disputed elements of the other's framing publicly and in court filings. The female gaze language that got attached to this story throughout is also worth pausing on, because Jacqueline's account complicates how that phrase has been used. The concept itself, that stories about women's experiences benefit from being shaped by women's perspectives, is a legitimate and widely used idea in film criticism. But if her account is accurate, the person Baldoni allegedly brought in specifically to provide that perspective had her work reportedly overridden by people who, publicly, were being framed as the side more attentive to women's stories. If true, that would be a genuinely strange contradiction. It's not proof of intent either way. People in productions are complicated and creative disputes happen on nearly every film, but it's the specific detail that's kept this story circulating across social platforms. Jacqueline also addressed the recurring online narrative painting Baldoni's religious beliefs, he's a member of the Baha'i faith, as something sinister or cult-like. She said she isn't a member herself, but has been around the community through him and described it, in her words, as centered on unity and peace, without pressure to convert or unusual ritual behavior attached to her experience of it. Framing someone's religion as inherently suspicious is a fairly old tactic in public smear campaigns generally, regardless of who it's aimed at. And it's worth flagging that as a pattern independent of whether any specific claim in this story turns out to be true. Attaching stigma to something unfamiliar is an easy way to make a person seem strange without engaging with the actual substance of allegations against or in favor of them. Jacqueline has also said she tried reaching out to other crew members to see if anyone else would corroborate her account publicly, and that most declined, citing fear of professional consequences, the legal resources available to the other side, or simple exhaustion at the idea of being pulled into a public fight of this scale. If accurate, that would help explain why her account existed in relative isolation for as long as it reportedly did, and why a described standing ovation in an edit bay stayed effectively unknown to the public for so long. That kind of chilling effect, real or perceived, is common in industries built on repeat collaboration and reputation, and it doesn't by itself prove which side's version of events is more accurate. It just means that silence in a situation like this isn't necessarily evidence of anything except fear, and shouldn't automatically be read as agreement with the dominant public narrative. Jacqueline reportedly points to a shift around a specific point in production where creative control, in her account, moved more firmly toward Lively, with the film increasingly treated as her comeback project rather than strictly Baldoni's. From there, she describes the editing process becoming an ongoing back and forth, with Baldoni allegedly trying to stay professional and avoid open conflict while gradually losing influence over final decisions. Whether that timeline is accurate, incomplete, or contested by other participants in the production is genuinely unclear from the outside. And it's the kind of detail that a court process or additional testimony from other crew members would be better positioned to sort out than any single interview. Jacqueline has emphasized that she has no described financial incentive tied to defending Baldoni. She's not selling anything connected to this, and by speaking publicly, she's arguably risking future work opportunities with powerful people currently positioned against him. That doesn't make her account automatically true, but it's part of why this specific interview has traveled so far across Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram discussion threads. It reads, to a lot of viewers, as someone acting against her own narrow self-interest rather than promoting herself. Her stated wish, going forward, is reportedly to see an unreleased director's cut. The version, she says, contains the scene that got the standing ovation. Eventually see daylight, whether through the ongoing legal process or otherwise. Whether that ever happens depends on the litigation, on decisions by the studio, and on factors well outside any single editor's control. For anyone just tuning in, it's worth backing up and laying out the broader shape of this dispute, because Jacqueline's interview didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed in the middle of one of the messiest public entertainment industry legal fights in recent memory. It Ends With Us was based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel about a woman navigating an abusive relationship, and Baldoni both directed the film and starred alongside Lively. The press tour for the movie was reportedly tense from the start, with some outlets noting visible distance between the two leads at public appearances, something plenty of fans picked up on in real time and started dissecting across TikTok and Instagram long before any legal filings existed. Then came the legal filings themselves. Lively reportedly filed a complaint alleging misconduct during production, and Baldoni's side responded with its own legal action, including a defamation claim against Lively, her husband Reynolds, and others involved in shaping the public narrative around the film's production. Both sides have since released competing sets of texts, statements, and timelines, each framed to support their own version of what happened on set and during post-production. None of it has been fully resolved in court as of now, and it's the kind of case where new documents and statements keep surfacing every few weeks, which is part of why the online conversation around it hasn't slowed down. That's the backdrop Jacqueline's interview sits inside. It's not a standalone claim. It's one more account being added to a pile of dueling narratives, each side insisting the documents and testimony support their version and undercut the others. If you've spent any time in the comment sections on this story, you've probably noticed how split the reactions are. Some corners of Reddit have gone deep into parsing the specific wording of the leaked texts, debating whether Blake, Ryan, really implies what Jacqueline's account suggests it does, or whether that's reading too much into shorthand from a studio representative. Other threads are more skeptical of Jacqueline entirely, pointing out that a decade-long friendship with Baldoni means she's not exactly a neutral witness, and that her account should be weighed accordingly rather than treated as the final word. On TikTok, the reaction has leaned more emotional. Stitched reaction videos, people replaying the moment she describes the standing ovation, others focusing on the detail about filming the interview twice because it felt, to them, like a marker of genuine reluctance rather than a calculated PR move. Instagram comment sections under entertainment news accounts have been similarly divided, with some users defending Lively and Reynolds' public track record and others saying, this account, if even partially accurate, undercuts the protecting survivors framing that shaped so much of the initial coverage. None of that internet debate settles anything, obviously. Public opinion isn't evidence, and viral reaction videos aren't legal findings, but it's worth naming honestly because part of why this story has legs isn't just the underlying facts, It's that it taps into something people already have strong, pre-existing opinions about. Whether celebrity ally branding matches private behavior, whether survivors get believed consistently or selectively, and whether the loudest public narrative in a dispute like this is ever the most accurate one. It's worth zooming out for a second, because this case isn't happening in isolation from a larger conversation about how Hollywood publicity actually works. Plenty of past industry disputes have followed a similar shape. An initial public narrative forms quickly, often shaped by whichever side has the stronger publicity apparatus in place, and it takes months or years, sometimes a formal legal process, before a fuller, messier picture starts to emerge. That doesn't mean every later account is automatically more true than the first one. Sometimes the first version holds up, but it does mean the version that reaches the public first isn't necessarily the most complete one. And that's a pattern worth being aware of regardless of how you feel about any specific person in this story. It's also part of why terms like female gaze, survivor, and protecting women's stories carry so much weight in the public conversation around this case specifically. They're not neutral descriptors here, they're contested framing that both sides have reportedly used to support opposite conclusions. Whichever side turns out to have used those terms more accurately is ultimately something that will likely come out through the legal process, court filings, and any additional testimony from other people who worked on the production, not through any single interview or viral clip. To be clear about the state of things, Baldoni and Lively are in active, ongoing legal proceedings against each other, with claims and countersuits still being litigated. Both sides have publicly disputed major elements of the other's account. Jacqueline's interview is one piece of testimony from one participant in the production, a potentially significant piece, given her described access and history, but not a verdict and not proof on its own of anyone's guilt or innocence. What it does add is another data point in an already complicated dispute, and it's part of why this story keeps resurfacing across gossip channels, entertainment podcasts, and social platforms instead of quietly fading out. Whether the alleged director's cut ever gets released, and whether it changes the public's understanding of what actually happened during production, is something that'll likely only get resolved as the legal process plays out further. For now, what we have is one editor's detailed, specific, but unproven account sitting directly opposite another side's equally firm denials, in a dispute that's very much still unfolding. If you want to actually track where this goes, rather than just where it's been, there are a few concrete things worth keeping an eye on. The first is the litigation calendar itself. Filings, motions, and any scheduled hearings tend to surface new documents. And in a case like this, new documents have repeatedly reshaped the public conversation more than any single interview has. The second is whether additional crew members beyond Jacqueline are willing to go on record, since her own account describes reaching out to others who declined. If that changes, it could either reinforce or complicate her version of events. The third is the fate of that alleged director's cut, whether it ever gets referenced in court exhibits, mentioned by the studio, or otherwise confirmed to exist in a form beyond one editor's description of it. It's also worth watching how both camps' public relations strategies evolve from here. Cases like this tend to play out on two tracks simultaneously. The actual courtroom process, which moves slowly and is bound by rules of evidence, and the public narrative track, which moves fast, is shaped by leaks, interviews, and social media reactions, and doesn't require anything to be proven before it spreads. Jacqueline's interview is very much a product of that second track, and so is most of what's been said publicly by the other side. That doesn't make either track meaningless. Public pressure and public accountability matter, but it does mean it's worth holding on to some healthy skepticism about any single account, hers included, until more of this plays out through channels with actual evidentiary standards attached. Whatever ultimately gets established as fact, this story is a useful reminder of something bigger than this one film. Celebrity narratives move fast. They're shaped by people whose job is literally to manage public perception. And the loudest, earliest version of events isn't automatically the most accurate one. That's true whether the eventual full picture ends up vindicating Baldoni, vindicating Lively and Reynolds, or landing somewhere messier and more complicated than either side's current framing suggests. If this one kept you hooked, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Clout Fallout so you don't miss the next update on this story.